Just pretend we're on the phone.
Okay, I'm doing it.
I'm on a walk with Benny. Pretend.
Okay, I'm
Benny,
pretending.
Benny,
Okay.
sit.
Okay,
You're
so what?
such a good boy.
Oh my God.
Can I be honest with you?
Yes.
I'm going to be very honest with you. I'm not a huge podcaster. I listen to Goop sometimes.
Yeah, you send me the goop. Okay.
I listened to this one called Remember Me. Anyway, I didn't know what Patreon was before you told me.
Subscribe to like 5. I'm not just saying this. I appreciate that content creators want, to fund their work.
I agree with you. So Patreon to me is probably something very different than it is to you. But to me, it's like, in Cruel Intentions when she goes, secrets aside, like it feels just like you're behind the curtain a little bit more. Like you get a little bit more raw footage, you get different tiers where you could join at, comfort levels of cost and what you want to know about us.
Yeah.
Like it's very cool.
We also spill some tea sometimes. Sometimes, all the time.
You're always like, don't tell people that.
It's a little bit more of us. And, not everybody wants that. But if you do, or if you want to support the content that we make, okay.
But you get like behind the scenes and stuff.
Yeah, the Three Stooges content, the Two Stooges.
But then it's also more writing. Right?
Yes, like, Rachel writes beautiful stuff in there. Mm-hmm.
You host events. Like it's just cool. It's just a cool space.
It's just cool.
There's a book club. I don't know. Just join it. Try it.
All right. People can go to the show notes.
Okay, go to the show
notes. Or you can go to patreon.com/remembermecommunity, or you can download the Patreon app and search Remember Me. We'd love to have you in there. It's a great
Can I say one more thing? Just one more thing.
Okay.
If you're like me and you don't know Patreon, you could also go to our website.
Yes.
Right? And there's a link there. So
yes, perfect.
Multiple ways to find us.
All right.
Join.
Hello and welcome to the Remember Me podcast. I'm Maria.
And I'm Rachel.
And we're your hosts.
And we're very happy you're here with us today.
Remember Me is dedicated to preserving the memories of those affected by dementia and the families walking alongside them.
We've created this space for you to feel more connected and supported.
And we hope these stories allow for a deeper understanding and a sense of belonging.
And to shine a light on our motto, accept the good.
Always, always accept the good.
This is Remember Me.
So today, we're here with a very special friend of the podcast, and we'll get into that later. Yes, Rachel?
Yeah. Don't give it away.
Okay,
just a person.
Okay, Meg, welcome to Remember Me.
Thank you. Happy to be here. Thanks.
Today, we're going to talk all about your husband, Bob, who I wish I got the chance to meet, but and talk all about your journey with FTD. So can you tell us the first signs that something wasn't quite right with Bob?
Yes. The first thing I noticed is in the summer of 2017, so June, July, he came home and told me he got a bad job review. And this was a first. Bob had been in this career for a long time. He every year got great reviews, was getting promoted, getting great bonuses. So this was highly unusual that all of a sudden he got a bad job review. But the worst part was when I asked him, he couldn't clearly articulate why, what the reason was. I was finally able to get some information out of him, and he said something like his boss is telling him that he's using outdated data to do his analysis. He was in banking, he was an analyst, and that's all he could say. And I found that very unusual, and even more unusual that he wasn't clear on what the issue was. He did mention that his boss had said that he would eventually like to move him to another department. So that was really alarming as well.
Did he, when he brought this news home to you, did he show any
alarm or concern or like, uh-oh, this isn't good?
Or was it like,
just
pass the salt?
Yeah, just
Yeah,
kind of like,
really,
I got a
yeah.
bad review.
yeah,
No,
right.
it wasn't. He didn't. No, it was sort of matter of fact,
Okay.
Oh, hey, just want to let you know I got a bad review today.
Huh.
And I can see Meg so clearly being like, what?
What? I know, right? Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
what? Okay. And were you seeing anything else? Anything else that you were clocking like all these pieces are not feeling
Yes.
right?
So I thought he might have been preoccupied. He worked from home and he was in the process of finishing the basement. He was kind of a self-taught person and he actually bought a book and learned how to frame a basement and box things out. And he was pretty talented in that way. So I said to him, are you spending too much time finishing the basement and not enough time on your work? And he, said, no, that wasn't the case at all, that he was definitely working. And I believed him when he said that. And then also at the same time, I started to notice that there was a lack of empathy and that he didn't seem to care as much. And when we went out with friends, he was quieter and didn't talk as much. And even some of my friends were commenting on why he seemed so, so quiet. And I thought he was just preoccupied. I thought he just had a lot going on, between work and his project in the basement. So I sort of just brushed it off, but I was still concerned about, the job review not going well.
That's so, I think we're all, when you go through something like this, so hyper aware to like change, like now not
on the
then.
other side.
Right,
Yes.
because I'm thinking
Right.
like I feel a little bit more quiet lately, like I wonder if anyone notices.
It's the paranoia that sets in after.
Yeah,
That's a
totally.
whole, yeah.
It's a good topic.
It is.
Hmm.
Bookmark
And
that.
then
Yeah.
And then at the same time, I noticed he was struggling a little bit with word finding. At first, it wasn't a big deal, and I wasn't with him 24/7. We were both working. But we had a trip to Maui planned in December of 2017. We went there with a friend, and I was with him every day, all day long. And I noticed that he was really struggling to say something. He might look at, a dragonfly and he'd say, the bug with wings. And I'd say, do you mean that dragonfly right there? Like, like
Yeah,
he couldn't
right.
come up with the simplest things. So I began to panic and think that, maybe he's had a stroke and,
Do
I
you
need to get
think
him some medical help.
Sure. Do you think he was aware of any of these changes?
No,
No.
not at all.
Okay.
Mm-mm.
Huh. Okay. So you're definitely aware and tracking all of it and paying attention. What finally gets you going with, medical attention?
Yes, definitely. When we were in Maui. So I begged him
Okay.
to let me take him to Maui Medical Center.
Oh, you thought like right then.
Yeah, like I thought he had a
Okay.
stroke
Okay.
and I thought we need to get help now. This is not my husband. This is not how my husband speaks.
Okay.
Meg is like a go-getter. She's like, we're going
Now.
to take care of the problem now.
Not
Now.
that that you know her.
I don't know her.
Okay.
We're meeting
So you're like, let's go. And he's like, we're in paradise, right? Like what happens?
Yes. So after, me finally being relentless, he finally caved in and we drove the hour to Maui Medical Center and he had a CAT scan. And first the doctor did the MOCA test.
Okay.
And he did okay on it. Bob was sort of a whiz in math, and he had said, I remember the first question was, count down from 100, 13 at a time.
Oh
And the
my
guy
gosh.
just like 87, whatever the next number.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no, please don't ask him math questions.
Right.
Yeah.
But he did, I can't remember how many questions he missed, but it was enough for me to know, no, this is not my husband. He would have never missed those questions. So we had a CAT scan, and the CAT scan, then the doctor came out and said, I see anomalies. He goes, I don't know what your husband's baseline is, but I see large black areas on the CAT scan, like volume loss. And he even said the word hydrocephaly to me. And, I'm somewhat familiar with hydrocephaly as I have had a brother with disabilities, and hydrocephaly was one of them. So I said, no, my husband does not have hydrocephaly. So he said, well, there's nothing I can do here. This is an acute care facility. Here's the number of a neurologist. follow up. And I said, well, I don't live in Maui, thank you. And I will follow up, and asked for a copy of the CAT scan so I could take it home with us.
And is Bob just like, let's go to the bar? Like he
Yeah,
just
let's go to the beach.
Okay.
Okay. I caved in. I did what you wanted. Now let's go to the
Yeah,
beach. Let's have a
right.
Mai Tai.
Oh my gosh. Not that I would ever know this happened to a stranger that I'm meeting on a podcast, but like, could you imagine being on a trip with your husband and being like, I got
in paradise.
Yeah, right. Okay. So you guys go back and have a Mai Tai, and
But
then
it's so Meg to be like, we're going to go take a look at this right now. They knew each other so well. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's interesting that you say, like, we were on vacation and I was, you were just focused on each other. Like, you weren't in the hustle and bustle of life where, you can miss things and you're distracted and working and everything. You were on vacation. You're like, you finally took a breath and were like, this isn't quite right.
You know how we were talking and I was like, I feel like I'm invested in so many of these stories. I like put myself in this marriage. Like, what would I do as this wife? Like, I don't know what I would do if I'd noticed something like that. If I'd be like, well, we're not moving on with this vacation until, or if I'd be like, I'll take care of it when we get home.
I know, but I do think the language is something that's like,
it's a little more scary.
Like
it's
abrupt. Like, why? And he was so, I think people are already getting the picture of Bob that he was extremely intelligent.
Mm-hmm.
So for him to be like the bug with wings.
Okay, yeah. Let's find out what happens next.
Yes.
Okay. So you guys get home, you have the CAT scan. What do you do?
Yes. So we get home. Bob happened to have an appointment with his PCP 2 days after we got home. So perfect timing.
Okay.
Like already scheduled.
Already scheduled. And
Did
it
you
happened
go?
to be and it happened to be my PCP as well. So when she walks into the room and sees me sitting there, she's like, what are you doing here? And I said, well, we've got a story. So told her what had happened, some of the signs I had noticed. Bob was also constantly complaining about like his throat, like he had some sort of congestion there or something. So I gave her a copy of the CAT scan. She looked at it. She repeated the Montreal test again, MoCA test. And again, he did marginal on that test. So she ordered an MRI for the next day. So we went back, he had the MRI, and of course, it takes a few days for those results to come. And it was just right before Christmas at this point when she called and said, the MRI is not showing any signs of vascular issues. So no stroke, there's no tumor, but there are anomalies. So we were relieved to hear some of the things that it was not, but then we were scared. Okay, well then what is it?
Oh, of course.
What's causing the imaging to show volume loss in his brain. So,
and is he aware of this at all? Like, I
think he's starting to be a little bit anxious about it because he was emotional after the doctor had given us the results of the MRI. We were both crying. So I think it was starting to kind of impact him.
And was FTD on the radar at all? Is there any?
Not at all. Okay. Not at all.
Had you ever heard of it?
No, nothing. At this point, I had no clue.
Okay.
I'm Googling, but I don't know. It could have been so many things.
Sure. They're just telling you there's something going on and it's volume
we don't
loss
know.
And,
yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
And you have to follow up with a neurologist, and that in the Boston area, there could be a wait for a neurologist, and not to panic. If I don't get an appointment till March, they'll do whatever they can to, expedite the appointment. And I said, not good enough. So I called someone who had some influence.
Good for you.
At one of the hospitals that I knew. And she was able to get me in to see 2 neurologists on January 2nd.
Wow.
So right after the holidays, we saw 2 neurologists first thing in the morning.
And what happened there?
And then, of course, they go through the whole thing again. They repeat the tests. They do a lot of these visual spatial things, touch your nose and, had him draw things and, did their preliminary exam. And then, of course, started ordering tests, starting with the blood tests and another MRI. And the whole thing started. from that point on. And then it was a process of elimination, trying to figure out what it was.
And during this time, what's Bob's demeanor? Is he withdrawing more?
No, he's very neutral. He's cooperative. He's going to all the appointments. He's getting all the testing done. From blood tests, he had to have a spinal tap. He had to have a PET scan. I mean, just the whole gamut of everything. And he was cooperative, and he went. At the same time, I'm working on him getting on disability at work because I know this is something serious. And early in the process, I slip and break my wrist. So now I need medical attention and care. I break my wrist in the middle of a blizzard.
So
I think you should. I think
you don't know that.
No, I
thought
I don't know, but this sounds like a story that should be told. I think it really. I have a vision that it might illustrate just like the life of a caregiver. So maybe you could just share a little bit. And then I think it really does illustrate as well, because I'm psychic, Bob's level of engagement in your relationship.
Right. So it's a stupid accident. I slip and fall. The plumber's over fixing the sink. It's snowing like crazy. I slip and fall. I use my left hand to break my fall. I break it. I actually telescoped the bone. So the doctor said to me. So I call 911 only because I can't drive and I don't want Bob to drive in this snowstorm. I go to the hospital with the ambulance, fishtailing all the way there. And I said to Bob, stay home. I'll take an Uber home. I don't want you on the road. Please do not follow the ambulance. Get it x-rayed. They say, you need surgery. They splint it. They said, here's the name of a hand specialist. Call him tomorrow, schedule your surgery. I walk out of the emergency room and Bob is standing right there. The poor thing. So we end up driving home in the snowstorm. All is good. But at the same time, I can't use my left hand at all. Not that Bob needed that much care at that point, but
you didn't
so
need
the
that.
next day, yes, the next day we have
you needed your hand.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So the next day, the doctor says to me, he said, yeah, you did a great job. That's a nice break. I can fix it. You need surgery. I have to put a little plate in there. How's Friday sound? And Bob had a doctor's appointment. And I said, oh, not good. I can't do Friday. Sorry. What's another day? And he looks at me like, what?
Yeah, right.
You have a bad break. You need surgery. And, I couldn't explain to him. I just didn't even bother at this point to explain to him, you don't understand what I'm going through right now. And Bob's doctor's appointment is way more important. My wrist will heal. I don't know what's wrong with my husband. So he's the priority. So then we end up going to his appointments with my arm in a splint. And then of course, his doctor's looking at me going, what happened to you? I'm like, don't ask.
Yeah, right.
So in the middle of that, I end up getting surgery a few days later. The doctor squeezes me in. He's very nice. I get the surgery, and Bob didn't seem that bothered at all. So my sister comes with me, and she sits with Bob while I'm, having surgery. But I could just tell he was not concerned at all. He she brought him an iPad so he could watch like a football game. So I knew that was odd as well. That behavior.
But at this point, he doesn't have a diagnosis. He's still being
No,
tested. Okay.
No diagnosis yet.
Okay. But you just know, like, he shouldn't be driving in the snow. He should be supervised.
And in your gut, what do you think is going on?
At this point, it's still early, although I am starting to read about early onset Alzheimer's. I am starting to read about FTD. And then out of all the things I was reading, I remember saying, oh my God, please don't let it be FTD. To me, that was the worst thing it could be. Like I was almost hoping anything but FTD.
Right.
So it was probably after a series of tests and going through the process of elimination, I would say probably by February, early to mid-February, the doctor was leaning towards FTD. Okay. In fact, during one of Bob's appointments, I said, after I did a lot of reading, I said, do you think it's FTD? And he said, yeah, I do.
Oy.
He said, I'm not ready. He goes, I'd like to do a few more tests, but that's what I think this is. And then, of course, my whole world just crumbled, because that was exactly what I didn't want to hear.
And so is he developing new behaviors at this time? Like, are you seeing an increase in that? Are you seeing a decrease in speech? What's kind of...
Yeah. At this point, I'm thinking he knows something's wrong as well, because he went out and bought Prevagen, and he started taking Prevagen. Now, he would not do that if he didn't think that there was something wrong with his brain and his memory. Maybe he thought he just had a memory problem. But yeah, I'm starting to notice different behaviors in communication. Particularly, he starts putting the word "the" in front of everything. So it would be, are we going to the Stephanie's house? Or he started saying he loved everything. I love the beach. I love the scallops. I love the flowers. And everything was beautiful. It was so funny how his language changed to everything's beautiful and he loves everything. So, and the precedes everything.
And you're like, how do I look today? He's like, you look beautiful. I love you. You're like, thanks. And how do I look now? Okay. So things are progressing. The doctor has an inkling. What happens next?
Let's see, next. Oh, and at the same time, the doctor's saying, Bob doesn't believe he has dementia. Once we finally get the diagnosis, he's saying, I don't have dementia. So he has the anosognosia.
Yeah.
And he is lacking that capability of understanding his disease. So I would try to have conversations with Bob, like, what do you think? How do you feel about this? Are you afraid? Have you read up on any of this on your own? And he would just say, I don't have dementia. And after a while, I stopped saying it, because if he doesn't think he has dementia, then I'm not going to tell him anymore, because I don't want it to stress him out. And if he's happy, then that's great for him, but it's just miserable for me, because now I have to deal with this disease 100% on my own,
So Hawaii was 2017, and then now we're in confirmed diagnosis late 2018.
So no, this is probably like February of 2018.
Okay.
So once we got the diagnosis, then we knew we had what we were dealing with. And I said to myself, we're going to start checking off things off that bucket list, because I don't know how long you're going to be healthy. I had been doing a lot of reading. I'd been talking to the doctor a lot. So 2018, we traveled. We went back to Hawaii. Bob loved Bermuda. We went to Bermuda a few times. We went out to visit friends in Salt Lake City. We were just going everywhere.
And he was able...
we went to Scotland and London. He was good there. He had done an internship in London. So when he got there, it was familiar. Like, he wanted to take me to all the places he had been before. So it was kind of, it was kind of nice. He said, oh, this is where I worked, or this is where this is the neighborhood I lived in. This is the restaurant I ate at, or the pub I ate at. So it was kind of nice. And then we went to Scotland, and he was fine. I did notice one thing when we were in Scotland. We were walking down the Royal Mile, and there was a bagpiper playing the bagpipes, and everybody stopped and listened. And I turn around and I look at Bob, and he's bawling. And I panicked, and I came running over, and I'm like, what's wrong? Are you hurt? Are you okay? What's going on? And he's like, the bagpipes. He's playing the bagpipes. And I said, that's why you're crying? Because he's playing the bagpipes? And he said, yes. And then I noticed Bob would get emotional when certain songs would come on. He would start crying. And I would say, well, why are you crying? And he would say, oh, this song reminds me of when I took that high school trip to Bermuda or something. So all of a sudden, music could turn on these emotions with him. And he loved music. And whenever songs would come on the radio that he liked, he would crank my radio full blast, and sort of dance in his seat. So, music made him happy. And so I was like, okay, if you're happy, go ahead. I'll be deaf after this.
Right. I won't be able to hear out of my
He would do that in the basement. He had a vinyl collection. So he would put on the music in the basement, and he'd play the same songs over and over and just dance. And times I'd go down and dance with him. That was like a new behavior for sure with FTD.
It sounds like a good one.
Yeah.
I mean,
and then he had another sort of odd behavior was his obsession with Hawaii. He loved anything Hawaiian. Of course, we would go to Hawaii as often as we could. We had a friend who lived there for a little while. And so all he wanted to do was move to Hawaii. He'd watch Hawaiian movies over and over. In fact, he was obsessed with the movie Blue Hawaii, the one with Elvis in it. I once had written in my journal, because I was keeping a journal during this whole process, I said, Bob has watched Blue Hawaii for the millionth time, and I'm at the point where I could recite every line, every character's line in the movie, and I would do it along with him. So, yeah, this obsession over that.
When I'm hearing this, it does, I know it's the most devastating disease, but it feels like it brought out like a very light and playful side of Bob.
It
Do you
did.
think that that's accurate?
Okay. Yeah. I used to call him New Bobby, old Bobby and new Bobby. I'm like, oh, look at new Bobby. He gets so emotional now over things where he didn't before. He was Mr., very cool, laid back. And now he's crying all the time.
I mean,
the movie Soul Surfer, when the young girl surfing and her arm gets bitten off by the shark. Oh my God. He's seen that movie a million times and now he's bawling, So it was sweet in a way.
Meg, how are you finding, like, your partner has completely changed and you are now full-time caregiver? I mean, I know you're working.
Still working.
But like, how are you surviving this time? How are you getting through it?
So, good question. I went back and read my journals during this time, and there was a lot of anger and frustration as, his behaviors were changing, and I'm trying to keep him happy and keep him safe. I've installed cameras in the house so I can peek in on him while I'm at work. I've installed Life 360 on his phone just in case, he wanders, which he never wandered, but he starts doing things like not telling me he's leaving and he gets in the car and off he goes to the store, or he drives to the Cape. We had a house down the Cape and it was our routine to go to the Cape every weekend. And I'd come home from work on Friday and his car is gone, and I'd call him up and say, where are you? I'm down the Cape. So, it got a little frustrating, some of these behaviors where he wouldn't tell me what was going on, and he would just leave, but he never wandered. He always went somewhere with purpose, but he just would never communicate where he was going. I would ask him things like, would you like to do this or that? And he'd say, yes.
Right.
So I had to learn not to ask this or that questions,
Yes or no.
So, and I think at the same time, he's texting less, he's reading less. So I'm wondering, is his ability going away, the ability to read and comprehend something? We're starting to go to cognitive and speech therapy. And, he's doing some funny things there with this woman, very nice woman named Amanda. He would bring his ukulele and he would sing to her during the therapy sessions. And while he was losing his ability to speak, it was starting to slur. He sounded kind of like he was drunk at times. He could still sing for a while because clearly that's a different part of the brain. But then it just reached sort of this tipping point where his vocabulary was going away and he was starting to point more at things instead of talk about it.
So what's that like? You're basically living in silence.
Right. And he was such a creature of habit that I could sort of anticipate what he wanted to do or where he wanted to go. Thank God for that. So it made it a lot easier, but that was probably the worst thing when the language was going away. And that pretty much all of 2018 was slipping away. And by 2019, early 2019, I think Christmas 2018, early 2019, he could barely say that he loved me. I would say it to him and he'd either kiss me on the head or he'd give me the shaka sign. He'd
Mr.
do this,
Yeah,
so I'm like,
of
okay,
course.
that's his way of saying
Right.
that he loves me. But that was the worst when he couldn't speak, because then it was
Yeah, you're
dreadfully
quiet.
quiet in the house. And then I had, I would still talk to him.
Of course. Yes, right. What else? I mean, I
But
think that's
yeah,
normal.
but it was, and at this point, I'm taking over everything. I'm paying the bills, and I'm about to take away his license. I think I had taken it away end of February, early March. Believe it or not, he was still driving, and he was a very conservative driver, because I would drive with him, ride in the passenger seat and watch and observe. And then one day I had a conversation with the neurologist, and he said, it doesn't matter, Meg, if he's conservative or not. His reaction time might not be sufficient if something were to happen. And if he gets into an accident and there's a diagnosis of dementia, it's his fault no matter what. So I took away his license, and then slowly but surely he's got nothing. Now he's just sitting home watching TV all day. I tried to, encourage him to read, but he couldn't read. And then at this point I realized, I need to get in-home care. I need some help. I can't do this on my own anymore. So I had a friend of mine come in and help me out 3 days a week to start. And then she was eventually there every day. But that was, at least I got a little bit of a break, and I was able to go to work and focus on work and not so much worry checking in on the cameras. So that helped out a great deal. But
Meg, are you comfortable talking about the end of Bob's life?
yes, yeah. So he really declined the summer of 2019. He had started having swallowing issues. He would hold fluids in his mouth. I started feeding him very soft and mushy foods. I would cut everything up. Then he would start choking, and then I would begin to worry about that. So then we switched to Boost drinks, and I would fortify those drinks with as much fat and protein as I could, because when he was not eating as much, he was starting to lose weight. His clothes weren't fitting anymore. I was buying him new, smaller sizes. So I was actually away at work in China, actually. And my sister and brother-in-law, who were so great and so helpful during this whole process, were staying with Bob that week. And my sister called me up and she said, I can't get him to eat anything. I can't get him to drink anything. So I called the neurologist. It's 1 o'clock in the morning, China time. By the time the doctor had called me back, and he said, I think it's probably time for you to consider hospice. And I said, well, no, I know someone in my support group whose wife is on a feeding tube. I want to look into that. And Bob's neurologist said, no, people with dementia don't do well with feeding tubes. And he said, but you're free to pursue that. I would never stop you from doing that. So I actually left China early, and the doctor put him on palliative care, but that didn't really work because Bob couldn't really communicate what he wanted. And that was key in palliative care, to communicate what you wanted.
Right.
And of course, he can't communicate. So then at this point, we're looking at hospice. Again, he's not eating. I'm doing the best I can to feed him. I think by July, August, I'm feeding him every day. And I'm trying to get him to drink the Boost drinks. And he starts fighting me. He won't even, at one time we had a fight, and the drink went flying. And all the chocolate, I would put all sorts of like Nutella, peanut butter, all sorts of protein and fat, ice cream in there, and that just splattered. And I was really getting defeated because I could see where this was going. If he's not going to eat or drink, he's not going to survive.
Right.
And so November 1st, we came down to the Cape, and he couldn't communicate, obviously, but I look out the window and I see him sitting in the passenger side of his truck. And so I'm like, whoa, that's kind of odd. So I grab my purse and I say, where do you want to go? To me, it was like, I want to go for a ride somewhere.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, let's go. So it was around sunset. So I said, all right, let's go watch the sunset at Old Silver Beach, because we used to go to our beach, but he wanted to go for a ride. So I'm like, all right. So we went there and we parked in a parking lot and we were watching the sunset. And I don't know if I had an inkling as to what was about to happen, but I just looked at him and I said, Bob, I just want to thank you so much for showing me the beauty of the Cape. I would have never seen this or experienced this if it wasn't for you. I love you so much. I had Hawaiian music playing, but I just wanted to make sure he knew that it was because of him I saw all this beauty and appreciated it. And I said, I just want to thank you. And you've been like the best husband ever. And I just want to make sure you know that. And we watched the sunset, and that was the last sunset we saw. And we came home, and I started making dinner. And I just went into the living room to check on him, and I noticed his breathing seemed labored and like he was wincing. So I listened to his chest and I was like, okay, that doesn't sound right. Sounds, he sounds congested. So I need to get him to a hospital. So I packed us up, got us back in the truck, and drove to a hospital in Boston, to Newton Wellesley. I didn't want to go to the hospital down here on the Cape because I didn't know, with FTD, I just felt like I needed to be near Boston. So we went into the emergency room and they brought him in, and they started putting an EKG. They were putting the stickers on him and hooking him up to the EKG machine. And he was struggling with them. He was like, I could tell he was agitated, and he was trying to pull off the stickers. And I kept trying to calm him down. I kept saying, Bobby, it's going to be okay. Just a few minutes, I'm by his side. And then all of a sudden he had this look, like this empty look, and he turned his head, and I screamed and I said, something's wrong, something's wrong. And like, it was like the life was coming out of his face, and he fell back onto the gurney. And then of course the crash cart comes in. And then of course all the doctors and nurses come in. I'm screaming in the emergency room saying, Bobby, please don't leave me. Please don't leave me. I wasn't ready. And this lovely nurse grabbed me because they were like, get her out of here. So he took me into like the family room and sat with me, and I had no idea what was happening. And he had gone into respiratory arrest. And when I came out, he was on I had a breathing tube put into him. He was intubated. And I called my friends to come, to the hospital, and they eventually showed up. And he was admitted, and he was admitted into ICU. He had pneumonia, and he was dehydrated, obviously, because he wasn't eating or drinking. And, they were basically telling me to, prepare. And I was like, again, prepare for what?
Yeah. Right.
Like, I want to take him home. And they were like, we don't think he's going to make it home. We think when we take him off that, when we remove the breathing tube, we don't think he's going to breathe on his own. And so I said, okay, can I take him home? Can I let him die at home, not here? They said, okay, we'll do everything we can to get him home. And they did. And I had a bed put in, and they had an ambulance ready. And it came the day, and they took the breathing tube out, and he wasn't able to breathe on his own. And I got to stay there with him and tell him that I loved him, and that it was okay for him to go. It was okay for him to go to sleep and to be at peace. And I said, I'll see you again. Like, don't worry. And he died, and my family was there, and they were there throughout, family and friends, for the 8 days. They would never let me be alone in the hospital. But yeah, so he had passed away there. And I did have a brain autopsy done, and they did confirm, in fact, that he did have FTD, and he actually had some early signs, they said, of Alzheimer's as well, but it wouldn't have necessarily turned into Alzheimer's, but it was confirmed that was in fact the case. So
was his cause of death respiratory?
Yes.
Or was it? Oh, okay.
Yeah. Respiratory aspiration pneumonia.
Huh. Yeah. So when you heard the sound in his chest, you heard the pneumonia?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. And of course that was my biggest fear again,
that it would,
because they said that could happen. And then when that happened, I just, knew time was limited.
Did they have any indication what was that when he fell back? Was it,
It just,
was
it was
it,
respiratory arrest. He was
wasn't,
basically, I don't know what the stress was.
okay.
They were hooking him up, and it was the stress of that triggered the respiratory issue arrest.
It wasn't.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
They had said his heart never stopped. It's just his lungs weren't functioning.
Huh. Okay. So no heart issue. When I
Yeah.
hear arrest, obviously I just go to the heart. So it took 8 days.
Yes. Yeah.
And
so
go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Bob had from diagnosis to the time he died, it was less than 2 years. So I'm so glad we crammed so much life into the first year when he was the healthiest.
Yeah.
I did not anticipate, I was expecting he would go into, a 24-hour care facility someday. But, all his doctor could say was, he was surprised too.
Right.
And he had just said that, Bob obviously had it a lot longer, had FTD a lot longer, but because he was such a bright person, he had a lot of cognitive reserve and was able to mask it for a long time until, I guess he just reached that tipping point, and then everything declined very quickly.
Yeah.
After
very
that.
quickly.
So, yeah. Yeah. So I was spared having to do some of the things that other decisions that people have had to make for their loved ones' long-term care. I didn't have to.
And
to
it sounds like you had like a movie set goodbye before the hospital with the sunset. Like, I think, does that give you peace, that interaction?
Yeah. I'm so glad. I don't know why, like, I did that. I don't know, but yeah, I felt better because I knew he understood me.
Right.
I knew it. And even though he couldn't tell me back that he loved me, I could tell, with the way he was looking at me, that he was comprehending. And oh,
that's beautiful.
I think we should take a quick break, and we'll be right back.
Hey, you guys, we're really glad you're here. We want to take a quick sec to talk about someone doing something really meaningful in this space, and that's the Progranulin Information Navigator, or PIN.
You've heard us talk about PIN before, and for good reason.
But do they only focus on patients who know they have the progranulin-related FTD?
That's a great question. The resources they have related to clinical trials are specific to progranulin, but the folks at PIN think it's important for everyone to have access to trusted resources and genetic counseling and testing to understand if FTD in their family is genetic. That's why they offer free genetic counseling and testing for patients diagnosed with FTD. Their mission is simple and powerful. No one should have to navigate FTD alone.
Navigating this world can feel like too much information, not enough clarity, and all of it is happening while you're carrying so much.
Speaking of, we're actually working on a special episode in partnership with PIN just for you to answer all of your burning questions about genetic testing and research.
So if there's something you've been wondering, this is your moment. Check the show notes for more info on that.
And get connected to clear, reliable information about clinical trials and free genetic counseling and testing. Visit progranulinavigator.org.
Or just click the show notes.
Thanks to PIN for supporting our community and our work at Remember Me.
And we're back. Okay.
Woo! We're back.
Okay, so we're back after a quick
I'm
little
fine.
break. Yes, thank you, Meg, for sharing all of that. I know what we hear a lot is people are terrified of the end and what it's going to look like and feel like and all of that. So to hear it described in that way, I'm sure is going to resonate with someone. So thank you very much for being vulnerable. And now we get to shift after that crying session into something light. Can you tell us how you and Bob met?
So we actually grew up together in the same small town of Ashland. And we were in grade school together. I knew who he was. I kind of had a little secret crush on him then. Bob was like a super smarty pants, and he was really chill. He never studied, always aced every
One of those
exam.
guys.
Yep, one of those guys. But you'd never know it if you talked to him because he was just so laid back. And so he went to a different high school, and then he came back to Ashland High School senior year because he thought it would improve his likelihood of getting into an Ivy League school. So that year, I actually dated his best friend for about 6 weeks.
I
I'll
wish I
tell you
had
why, because
tea
that
to
comes
tell.
back later.
Okay.
So we got reacquainted senior year, but nothing really. And then fast forward 20 years, we reconnect at our 20th high school reunion. We're both, 37, 38 years old. Neither one of us were in a relationship or had been married before. And so we just connected. And so he asked for my telephone number, and a few weeks later we started going out. And then we're together for 18 years after that.
But you were also what? I know, it's the best.
Yeah.
So, okay. So you're like, I know you, but I don't really know you. I grew up with you, but
Right.
also we kind of had different. Okay. All right. And how did he ask you to marry him?
Oh, we were in Charleston, and I had no idea because I just thought we were going to date forever. We had been living together for a number of years. So we went down to Charleston and we went out to dinner. And we came back and it was kind of late. And it was just the two of us. We were at an inn, and it was the two of us on this gorgeous porch with all the candles lit and the gas lanterns. And he just basically turned to me and said, I have to ask you a question. I'm like, okay. And he goes, he gets down on one knee. I'm like, what are you doing? And he goes, will you marry me? And I'm like, are you kidding? Like, the poor guy, it was awful for me to say that, but I was like in such shock. I'm like, are you serious? And he said, yes, of course I'm serious. And I said, well, okay, yes, of course I will marry you. But it was funny, just not expected. And
Sure.
I'm sure he was not happy with my reaction. Are you kidding?
Get up. What are you doing down there?
I know. What are you doing down there? Like, what's going on?
Sorry, you could ask a question.
Yep.
Sorry, I've been.
No, I'm good.
Okay, so then I'll ask more. Can you describe him? What was he like? Not as a husband yet, but just as a person.
Just loved life, was so laid back, loved to enjoy things, loved nature, loved the beach, the ocean, being out on the water. He loved hanging out with friends and family and dancing, and his priorities were straight. Like, he knew work was important. He did a great job at work. He was always focused before FTD, but he knew work was just work, and there was so much more to life. And so I was so happy that he kept that in perspective and, really enjoyed life, because obviously we didn't know he was going to die at 56. So I was happy that he did that. And he was an only child, and he took such great care of both of his parents. His mom had passed away first, and then he became his dad's kind of caretaker. And I have to tell you, it was through watching Bob care for his parents that I actually learned to care for him. That he demonstrated this love and this ability to just be the perfect caretaker, that when it came time for me to be his, I followed his example. It was him that taught me how to be a caretaker. In fact, after his father had passed away, I wrote him a note because I was leaving for a trip to Asia for work. And I wrote him a note, and I just, praised him for how wonderful he was and what a great son he was and how he led by example. And I said to him, and now it's my turn to take care of you.
Okay. Do you want to ask a question?
Okay. I have a pile of tissues here. Sorry. What was your favorite thing about Bob?
that he was so calm. I was very like crazy. I was irrational and emotional at times. And he was like just this calming presence to me. And we were the opposite, but we complemented each other. Like sometimes I was the spark he needed to do something, but he was always that calming person for me. And we had this way of talking to each other without communicating, just by the way we would look at each other in certain instances, and I would know exactly what he wanted to say. Like, especially when I did something like really stupid or silly or something, he'd give me this look. He would never say anything, but he'd give me this look like, really, Meg, are you kidding? And it just make me laugh. So I just loved how we had this sort of secret language, and he never made me feel bad about it. But he was, and he was my voice of reason that I needed, so he was a
yes,
good.
I do.
Yes.
And sometimes you
And my
want to
calming
shut that
presence
voice
and-
up, don't you? Like, okay, I know I need to calm down, but I'm not going to. I think that's beautiful.
Yes. We're going to hear more of Meg's story in our next week's episode, but I think we should ask her the final two Remember Me questions.
I'll ask the first. How do you think Bob would like to be remembered?
He would definitely like to be remembered as someone who really cared about his friends and his family. Like, he was so genuine. He could talk to anyone about anything, and he was genuinely interested in whatever you had to say. He was the most amazing listener, and it was through that he learned, about people and places and things. And I saw so much more through his eyes than I ever did, because he had that inquisitive way about him. And I think he would love to be remembered as someone who loved people, loved life, was the best son to his parents, great friend, the best husband, and that he knew what was important in life.
I wish I could have hung out with Bob.
He reminds me a little bit of Frank.
I know one of the things he wanted to do was, when he retired, he wanted to retire somewhere south. He wanted to live on the beach. And so sometimes when I think of him, wherever he is now in heaven, I always think he's there with his parents and his family, and that he's sitting on the beach and he's surfing some cool waves and just living life and being happy and free. So,
Meg, you're doing amazing. Meg, do you have something to read, and will you tell us a little bit?
I do. So
about
Bob, in the beginning, he was more of a letter writer. When our in the end of our relationship, we would love to send each other like funny cards, goofy cards. We'd leave them certain places. You discover it later kind of thing, or we'd leave each other like a little goofy note about something, or a note of love or whatever. So I do have a Valentine's Day card where he wrote a note on it. And it kind of goes back to that story where I told you we knew each other. We've known each other since grade school. And I secretly had a crush on him, but I would never reveal that because I dated his best friend, And I asked him once, I said, what took you 20 years to ask me out? And he said, well, there's a statute of limitations on that after you dated my best friend, but I couldn't do that right away.
All right, Bobby.
I know. Yeah. So I was like, okay. So he sent me a Valentine's Day card. He says, "Dear Maggie, I know sometimes it probably sounds like I am exaggerating, but I really have had a crush on you for the past 30 years or more. And my fondness and love and admiration gets stronger every day. Lots of love, Bob."
Thank you for listening to this week's episode.
If you want to learn more about Remember Me, you can go to remembermeftd.com.
We also love getting new Instagram followers, and you can follow us at Remember Me Podcast.
We're also building a space just for you at the Remember Me Foundation. For more information or to donate, visit remembermefoundation.org.
This podcast is produced by Maria Kent Beers
and Rachel Martinez.
And the beautiful music you hear is a song called So Damn Lucky by Bailey Kent.